We spoke about Pesach. We spoke about the mitzvah to tell over the story. And then we talked about the mitzvah to eat the matzah. And I suggested that there are two primary elements that we're focusing on when it comes to Pesach. One is the Korban Pesach, the offering, which is either a lamb or a goat, that is brought on the 14th and then eaten on the 15th at night. And that Korban, that offering comes with a whole bunch of meaning, a whole, like a world of meaning. And the fact that it's called the Pesach offering gives us a little bit of light onto some of the potential meaning of it. So you have that, and then you have matzah, which itself is like a whole world of meaning. And then somehow the experience from beginning to end is some kind of a combination or a hybrid of the ideas represented by those two. They are the two primary symbols of Pesach, and around them are sort of worlds of meaning. Here is a mitzvah 159. That is that he commanded us to rest on the first day of Pesach, and that is his may be exalted saying, and on the first day a sacred occasion. So what we call the first day of Pesach is a day of rest. When it says a day of rest, we understand that to mean rest from the same kind of creative work that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. There's a slight variation when it comes to Yom Tov. Those things that are directly related to cooking, there are elements of the Shabbos law that do not apply to things that have to do with cooking, because that is one of the special features of Yom Tov, which are these festive meals, and you're expecting to have people over all the time, and so the joy of Yom Tov is going to be experienced around meals. But other than that, when it says a day of rest, it means that you're resting from creative work. So it is mostly like a day like Shabbos. And the explanation came to say, sanctify it. That is that you should not do any work on it except that which is specific for eating alone, as is explained in the scripture. Their language already appeared. This term Shabbaton is a positive commandment. This means to say that every holiday about which God said Shabbaton is as if he said rest or you shall rest. And these are the commands to rest. So it doesn't always say you shall rest in every holiday. It might just say Shabbaton, but that word Shabbaton, built out of the word Shabbat, which means rest, it's as if it said you shall rest, because it's a rest day. So they treat it equivalent to God have saying you shall rest. And they're saying a holiday is a positive commandment and a negative habit has already come an explanation in many places. So, for instance, not doing work on this day, that would be a negative statement. To rest is a positive statement. So if you say it is a day to rest, you're making a positive statement, but what you mean is that you're not going to be doing creative work. So that's how you can have like a positive and a negative commandment sort of wrapped into one. This means that the negation of work as a holiday is a positive commandment. In other words, I want you to rest. A lot of times people ask you to phrase things in a positive way. It's not so much that you could say it's not so much that I'm against noise in the street. It's I'm for opportunities for meditation. you're framing it in a positive direction, but in order to have accomplish what you want, you're going to have to prohibit it something. So you might have to not allow cars on the road. If you want this area to have a more quiet, meditative atmosphere, there's going to be certain things that eventually are going to be prohibited, but you're not stating it that way. A lot of times politicians spend their time doing this, changing it, reframing it. So this is kind of that thing. This means that the negation of work on a holiday is a positive commandment, and that not doing certain work is a negative commandment. And hence, one who does certain work as it has transgressed a positive commandment, a negative commandment. And the regulation of this commandment, meaning resting, has already been explained in Tractate Beitza. So this is a sort of weird thing about Pesach, which is we've taken it for granted, but it's weird that the first day of Pesach is a holiday and the last day of Pesach is a holiday. Now, if you live outside of Israel, the first 2 days are a holiday and the last 2 days are a holiday. But that's just because of a deal with finding out when Rosh Chodesh happened. It's a technical issue that came up when it with the calendar. But otherwise, and this is true in Israel, the first day is a holiday, the last day is a holiday, which is sort of interesting. And there's these intermediary days, so which we call Chol HaMoed. So you have this kind of, first you start with a holiday, then you go into sort of holiday. A lot of people don't know this about Chol HaMoed, but Chol HaMoed, you really are supposed to treat it more like holiday than weekday. There are actually rules for how to experience those intermediary days. You're not supposed to do creative work unless it's directly related to Simchas HaChag. So, for instance, you're not supposed to do laundry. You're not supposed to do work on your house. You're not supposed to do work in the field. There are times where you could do creative work, but they're meant to be limited in scope. There really is a lot of law. Rabbi Moshe Francis, may he live long and in good health, and Rabbi Zucker from the Chicago Community Kollel wrote a book about what these laws are, trying to just bring them back to general knowledge. They've always been there, but just to bring them back into practice and regular discussion. But anyways, it's sort of an interesting thing. You're in full holiday mode, then you go to Chol HaMoed, then you come back to full holiday mode. Now, again, keeping that notion of hybrid, you could have, you have one, it's not easy to completely separate the Pesach theme from the matzah theme. It's not so simple, but you could suggest that the first day is Pesach related to the Korban Pesach, the offering, and the last one is matzah related. It's related to Chag HaMatzos. So, in other words, each part of the hybrid celebration, which we call Pesach or Chag HaMatzos, each part of that has a holiday day, and the last one. Also, there's a kind of spillover between these days, because Chag HaMatzos is already starting when you have Pesach. Now, so but it seems like if you would say that the matzah celebration really has Chol Hamoed in it. The Pesach one doesn't really have Chol Hamoed in it. So the Pesach one, which would just be the first day, which would include the offering of the Pesach, the Seder night, and then the day after, that would be the total of your Pesach experience. Again, talking hybrid language. And then, but the Chag HaMatzos would include the first day holiday, the Chol Hamoed, and the last day holiday. So that's why I'm saying it's not easy just to break them into two. In a Venn diagram, the Chag HaMatzos seems to also include the Chag HaPesach, even though it has exclusive time when the Pesach offering is no longer the main theme, but it seems to even cover when the Pesach offering is being given. Somebody might say it's secondary to the Pesach offering. But what's also interesting is that the Pesach experience, as we saw before, the Pesach experience really starts with the slaughtering of the Pesach offering, which is on the day of the 14th. But the actual holiday, the time when it's forbidden to do creative work, fully, doesn't begin till sunset. So it's just there's lots of layers here. And really, when you're unpacking Pesach, you can already see there's just so much to work with and so much to unpack and to organize. And just when you think you have it organized, you can switch it around and reorganize it. This also introduces, by the way the Rambam writes this, it introduces the notion of positive rest, that there's such a thing as positive rest. He calls it a positive commandment. So that rest is not merely not working. Rest itself is an activity, as it were. It is something that takes up its own space. Sometimes people try to say that rest is about being as opposed to doing. So when it's applied to Shabbos, 6 days you shall work. That means 6 days you're out doing. And then the 7th day you shall rest means that you're no longer going to be doing. Now you're going to only be being. Now for us in Western culture, it doesn't sound like anything. What does it mean to be? It doesn't sound, we only think of activity as doing, and we only think of valuable time spent as activity. So for us, you're either doing or there's nothing going on, right? This is one of the challenges of being a member of Western culture. What we're meant to be learning from Shabbos and Yom Tov and other things is that there is such a thing as a world without doing, a world without our profession, a world without our accomplishments or achievements, but just a place for what we would call being. But exploring that space, what it is to be and how to best use it, is one of the challenges of Shabbos and Yom Tov. And I would say a lot of people don't even know that, they just have sort of fallen into a pattern. I for the most part do. I fall into a certain pattern and I just follow that pattern every week without really exploring the space of being. What are the options? What's available on Shabbos that I cannot do during the week or on Yom Tov? What opportunities for being, and what does it even mean to be? That kind of thing is available for exploration on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And this, you could say, the Rambam is emphasizing it. It's a positive commandment. This means that the negation of work on a holiday is a positive commandment. You shall rest. So this is what we're going to call active rest. And there is such a thing, even though it sounds like a contradiction, but it's because we need to hear that word active. Okay. So now we have the seventh day. It's going to be short. That is that he commanded us to rest from work on the seventh day of Pesach. And that is, he may be exalted, saying a sacred occasion on the seventh day. So again, our active resting going on then. Right now, we are going to have the mitzvah of counting the Omer. That is that he commanded us to count 49 days from the harvesting of the Omer. That is his, God, may he be exalted, saying, you shall count for yourselves 7 weeks from the morrow of the Shabbat. And you should know that just like the court is obligated to count the years of the Jubilee year by year, and cycle by cycle, as we explained in what came previously, the book of Mitzvot, Positive Command 140, so too is each and every one of us obligated to count the days of the Omer. So the Sanhedrin is obligated to count the Jubilee years. We are, each individual is obligated to count the Omer. One of the options could have been that the Sanhedrin will be in charge of counting those days, and it'll just be something fixed into the calendar, and we won't have to have a special mitzvah of declaring what day it is. But we do. So too is each and every one of us obligated to count the days of the Omer day by day and week by week. And that is, having said, you must count 50 days. 7 weeks shall you count for yourself. And just like the commandment of counting the years and the sabbatical cycles is one commandment. So again, the way the Sanhedrin will count it is you're counting how many years till the next Jubilee. But the way you count it is this is year 1, this is year 2, this is year 3, you're going to get to 49, and then the next one's going to be the Jubilee. So you're counting that, but you're also counting what year in the sabbatical cycle you are. Because in Israel, there's a sabbatical cycle. Now, if you're a farmer, it's very important to know the sabbatical cycle. But even if you're not a farmer, just a consumer, you need to know the sabbatical cycle for a couple of reasons. One reason is that you're not allowed to do business with fruit or vegetables that were grown during the sabbatical year. You're allowed to eat them, but you're not allowed to do business with them. So if you walked on what was somebody's property on the sabbatical year, and there are apples growing, or right after, forget apples, it's easier, let's say peppers, red peppers. So you can pick the red peppers and you can eat the red peppers, but you can't do business with the red peppers. They can be eaten locally by whoever comes around, even the people whose property it is technically. They can eat it, but they can't do business with it. So you as a consumer need to know if the product that you're using was used in commerce on Shemitah, which would be forbidden. But you also need to know what year it is in the Shemitah cycle, because there is a certain tithe, a tax, which you give, it's called the second tithe, and that second tithe in the 3rd and 6th year of the Shemitah cycle goes to the poor. The other years, you are meant to take that produce with you to Jerusalem and eat it in Jerusalem. So, so if you are a farmer or have a garden, even, it's important to know which year it is, so you know what's supposed to happen with that second tithe. So that's another reason you want to know what year of the cycle it is. And do not be fooled by their saying it is a commandment to count days and is a commandment to count weeks. That makes it sound like it's 2 separate commandments. And think that they are 2 commandments, for it is a commandment to do each and every part of the commandments that have different parts. However, had they said, from where do we know that the days are a commandment, and for where do you know that the weeks are a commandment, would have been 2 commandments. In other words, sometimes he's not sure how to count these mitzvahs, and he's looking to the language of the Talmud or halachic midrash to see how they treated it. And now he's giving us a little insight, kind of key. They would have written it differently if they wanted us to count this as 2 separate mitzvahs. It's one mitzvah that has 2 parts. So when you're counting the Omer, which we do at night, during that time from what we call the second day of Passover till the holiday of Shavuos. So we'll count it. Let's say you're at day 12. So you go, this is day 12, which is 1 week and 5 days into the Omer. So you're counting the weeks and the days as together. So the Rambam's saying that's 2 separate commandments. I mean, it's 1 commandment, even though it has 2 components. And this will not be lost on the one that will not be fooled by these words. Since where do you say it's an obligation to do such and such, it surely does not necessarily make that action a separate commandment. And the clear proof of this is that our counting every night, that is such and such weeks and such days. Were it to be a separate commandment, we would only arrange its content on the night of Shavuos and would say 2 blessings on the counting of the Omer and on the counting of the weeks of the Omer. But the things are not like this. Rather, the commandment is counting the Omer daily and weekly as they ordained. Women are not obligated in this commandment because it's considered a positive time-bound commandment. Again, Ashkenazi Jews, the women make a blessing even on mitzvahs they're not commanded. So if a woman wanted to do this mitzvah, she would do it just like men do it. And she would make a blessing before and count it just like the men do it. Sephardic custom is that women do not make a blessing if they're not obliged. So for Sephardic women, I'm assuming the case would be here that that they do not make a blessing before. But we certainly hold that even if somebody's not obliged to do a mitzvah, if women are not obliged to do one of the mitzvahs that are time bound, they certainly can and fulfill a mitzvah when they do the mitzvah. But again, this is a time bound commandment, and therefore time bound positive commandment, and therefore the women are not commanded in it. There's a lot of sort of like details about how to fulfill this mitzvah. But one of them is that it's meant to be, and again, this is something where you really have to look more into the details to figure out why this is, but it's considered one big mitzvah. And if you miss a day, it's possible that you may no longer be fulfilling the mitzvah, or you didn't fulfill the mitzvah in its entirety. So if somebody misses a day of counting, in most situations, they would not continue with a blessing. They would still count, but they wouldn't say the blessing. And so this becomes a great challenge every year for a lot of people to if they finally get to Shavuos and they're still saying it with a blessing, that many consider that one of the great achievements of their life when doing it. The Omer itself was a barley offering that is brought on the 16th of Nisan. This, so you're counting from the Omer offering. The Omer is a measure of barley that is cut on that day and then offered in the Beit HaMikdash. They did it with great pomp and ceremony. And once the Omer was offered, it was now permitted to eat the grains of the season. We saw this before. There are 5 grains, the same grains that are that you can make matzah out of, or that can become chametz. Those same grains are forbidden for a person to eat until the Omer offering is brought. So anything that took root after Pesach, after the second day of Pesach, now has to wait until the next Pesach before that grain can be eaten. That's called chadash, the new grain. And so the Omer offering, the first barley offering, permits it. So this is a moment that really could have impact on a lot of people during that time, even though we might think of it as just sort of blip on the sacrificial calendar. But for many people, that would be a very significant day, because now it opens up the use of all sorts of stored grain. That's A. The reason it was done with a lot of pomp and ceremony, though, is not because of that, but because the Sadducees disagreed about the interpretation of that verse. The Sadducees, as far as I remember, I am not a scholar of this, of the Sadducees. I've only read about them in when they come up in the Gemara or in other Torah works or commentary, or when I heard Barrel Wine. I read about them in Paul Johnson's History of the Jews and a few Wikipedia entries. But the Sadducees were a subsection of the Jewish people after at the end of the Second Temple. According to Rabbi Barrel Wine, of blessed memory, they were a kind of rehashing or reformation of the Hellenists. That Hanukkah is not just a revolutionary war, but Hanukkah was also a civil war. There were a sizable chunk of Jews who had become Hellenists, and the Hasmoneans were fighting against them, just like they were fighting against the Assyrian Greeks. Eventually, the Hellenists are put down, and many died, and a few of them escaped to towns along the coast. And he suggested that and I don't know where he gets this from, but I trust him, that they sort of reemerge as the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees have their own platform, but one of them seems to be that they were sort of assimilated into Roman culture. But they also, they still appeared to be very religious. The Hellenists did not appear to be religious. The Hellenists fully adopt what at the time is Greek culture. But the Sadducees appear religious. They make the argument that they are not beholden to the oral tradition that others felt beholden to. They argue that something similar to the Karaites, that the written Torah is dominant and the oral Torah is not. Exactly how that played out with them, I don't know. I don't know if they're identical to the Karaites. When I was reading about Karaites recently, there are some who suggest that the Karaites all go all the way back to the Sadducees, or may even be before the Sadducees. I don't know. But anyways, the Sadducees read the Torah in this place literally. The Torah says from the day after the Sabbath. So they decided, if you notice here, it was on line 3 over here. It says, and this is his, may be exalted, saying, you shall count for yourselves 7 weeks from the morrow of the Sabbath, from the day after the Sabbath. So therefore they say the Omer offering is brought on a Sunday. So if the Seder night was on a Wednesday, you wait till Sunday, bring the Omer, and you start counting the Omer. So it ends up that they have a completely different counting, and therefore Shavuos is on a completely different day for the Sadducees than it is for for the rest of Jewry. This could be a big deal, and like I was pointing out to you before, when you start messing with the calendar, you're messing with one of the most important features of Jewish unity, which is that we're all celebrating holidays together, and that's massive. And if you have different calendars, we're not. So you could see why this would be such a big deal. The other thing is, this is my suggestion. I haven't, although I was told by Rabbi Becher and Rabbi Brand, I think, that it could be Reb Shlomo Fisher and also Reb Herschel Schechter might have mentioned something like this one time, because I was once mentioning it, that I think it seems to me that the reason this would be so important is because our tradition is that Shavuos is, besides being a celebration of the wheat harvest that and the beginning of the first fruits, that Shavuos is a celebration of Sinai event. Now it works out if you start counting and bring the Omer, you start counting on the 16th of Nisan, it works out to coincide with when the Torah was given. But if you don't, if you start counting several days later, then it doesn't coincide, which would mean that part of the result of the way the Sadducees read it is that Shavuos and Sinai are not connected. And that would be another reason why it would be a dramatic problem. So even though it might seem to be an esoteric detail of when the Omer offering is, it has real dramatic consequences. So the rabbis, who they call the Sadducees, call the Pharisees, made a celebration, a dramatic celebration, out of the Omer offering. So it was done with lots of pomp and ceremony. And on the for us in Chutz La'aretz is the second day of. So the morrow of the Sabbath would mean the day after Yom Tov. And as you saw before, the Torah on many occasions refers to Yom Tov as Shabbat, Shabbaton. It uses that term for rest, act of rest. So, but so that's a big part of why they do that celebration. I look forward to continuing this discussion as we move forward. It's really awesome to see your faces and to spend time with you guys.